Well, hello, everybody. Larry Young here again. And on today's segment, I want to talk about something that began last year in February when I was given a strong message about the month of October of 2023 would be the month of the Great Unveiling. Now, all throughout the year, I just tried to set on that and not really mention it to people because I didn't want to freak them out any more than they already were. And I didn't really know what to think about it either, but it was just a mention of the Great Unveiling, what happened in October. Now, I went back through to remember what happened here in October just several months back and what happened in the world and how things really showed us the truth about the situations rather than just the storylines that we've been told behind them. One of the things that happened in October was Pope Francis shut down two of the most conservative voices in the North American church. One of them being Bishop Strickland down in Texas, and the other one being the voice of Cardinal Raymond Burke. So if you don't know about these guys, you might want to look into them in some of the stories that they were shut down for. Cardinal Burke, I think, was mainly because of a cascading bunch of things that had happened since Pope Francis took over. The first thing that happened was Francis ran Cardinal Burke off of the Apostolic Signatura, which is basically the Supreme Court of the Catholic Church. They didn't like his conservative voice on there, and so they ran him out. And that was payback then in October because Cardinal Burke asked for clarification on the Pope's statement about blessing of same-sex unions. So the man was just asking for clarification, and in response, he was basically shown the door and told him his help was no longer needed. Now, what happened also in October was we had the just incredible terrorist attacks which happened on Israel by the Palestinian terrorists. And in that event, what happened in the very next 24-hour news cycle is that the victims of this terrorist attack were set upon as being the problem. And they were considered as being the antagonists in this, and it was all their fault. And so all these babies and women who were raped and murdered and all like that, it was their fault, and they deserved it. Now, this is just hideous. And what has been the response on that, whether it's proportionality and all like that, what people want, when something like that, and you're up for trying to save your life in your entire existence, proportionality can go right out the window as far as the response goes, because when you're up against it, you're in the fight for your life. So we have to see where this all falls out. Now, in that same month, then, our U.S. president, he doubled down on his attacks on people, describing them as MAGA. Now, MAGA stands for Make America Great Again. So I really don't know what the problem is with that unless somebody doesn't want to have a good, strong union and a good, strong place to work in where they can feel confidence and they don't feel insecure and they don't feel threats to their lives and their person and their families. I don't see anything wrong with that. We can talk about the methods that we use to get there. But in the meantime, let's not sit there and shut people down for wanting to do good and let them have a chance at doing it rather than just discrediting them because of your opinion and trying to make that harder against somebody else. I don't think that's a good way to lead. Ex-President Trump, he got put on trial and had a huge, massive judgment against him in New York for practicing what is basically a normal business practice in the developers' community. And the banks know this, and this is why they have their own groups of auditors and appraisers and specialists in these things. What they went after him for was a consumer protection law. And they revised it and changed the wording around to fit their narrative as to what they wanted. Now, when they changed that narrative around, a lot of you folks may know that I was a licensed auctioneer for over 20 years. And when I would start off something for sale, it's typical for an auctioneer to start off, if they think that the item's worth $50 or $100, they'll start the bidding off at that to see if anyone agrees with them and jumps on it and gets to what the seller's request is faster. So time is always of the essence when you're doing an auction. But under this analysis and this interpretation of the law that this judge and this prosecutor put, I'd have been guilty for every time that I asked for an opening bid that was above what the bid actually registered in the gallery. So, for instance, if I asked for $50 and nobody bid, then we drop it down to $10 and start running it up. And if they stopped at $35, I could have been charged for fraud under this rule. So this is not how business goes. This is not how businesses work in the development area. If they have a building and they want to go and refinance it to use it to help leverage the building of the next building, they'll go in with a set of documents and they say, we think the building's worth $100 million. And the bank will say, well, okay, let us do our review and then we'll come back. And then the bank may come back and say, no, we only think it's worth $65 million if we had to liquidate it today. And so the developer would have to take the reduced valuation on it or go find a different bank. This is just how it's been. It's like if you're trying to sell anything on Facebook or any of these other websites where they say make an offer, somebody starts something off, you're all doing it too. You started off at $100 and you end up taking $85 because that's what the market said they'd offer you and you just wanted to be done with it. Under this interpretation, you would be guilty of the same. So we have to make sure that we know what our words mean and what our purposeful intent is in going about our day and our work. And we have to be fair, and we have to try to shoot for purity in our work. We want to make sure that we're following the rules, that we're not being selfish in our regard for our friends and our neighbors and our people we're doing business with, but we want to make sure that we're holding them in regard and not trying to selfishly make ourselves profit at their loss, especially without them knowing that something's going on. So I really think that this application of the consumer protection law in New York was a really misguided thing, and I think it's going to end up hurting the state and its people very, very hard in the coming year. So what have we got from these things? What we have is a divided country right now, and sometimes in our own families, and we have to be careful about this. So the incidents of insecurity, the anger, self-isolation, and resultant crime that's come about in our society, just can't be denied. It's out there, and it's making more people sick just from their concerns, from those things, basically insecurity. They're not sleeping. They're not listening to the whole story. They're taking bits and pieces of things, and then they run with it as fact rather than looking into it themselves. Now, when did this all start? Well, from my perspective, I started seeing it back in the early 2000s with the adjunct of people coming up with their going from telephones to smartphone devices. So these little critters here have been changing the way people think, work, and communicate. So what do we do about this? Well, we have to sit there and be careful that we don't let our children continue the practice of watching other people do things online and on their devices rather than doing things themselves. What has happened since the adjunct of these smartphone devices and the websites and the TikToks, the other things? I forget what was the other one. Well, everyone was on Facebook for the longest time. Now nobody really does that except us old dudes. And but what happened was we created a whole generation of watchers, and what they regard as being critical to their development and their happiness is watching other people do things. rather than them doing things. So they've quietly been sedated by their devices to sit back and kind of watch the rest of the parade go by, and then they miss out on it. And when they find out that they've missed out, what happens to them? They become insecure because they haven't done anything and they don't get a bunch of likes and things like that. So they start questioning whether or not they have value, and all these things just start cascading and spiraling out of control. And you start having an affected population that really doesn't know how to behave because they're waiting for their next instruction from who is telling them something online. So we have to be very, very careful about that. Watch it in your own life. Watch it in your children's lives. Watch it in those that you work with. See how they're spending their time and how their voice is being spoken, what they're saying. Is this something that's out of their mouth, or are they just parroting something somebody else has said? Now, I'm not saying everything's bad. I'm just saying you have to be careful. You have to notice these things. Now, I've been really concerned about saying what I'm about to say. But as happened last year in February when I got a very strong message, this February I got another strong message. And I've been praying on it and meditating on it, and I really was concerned about whether or not I should say anything. So I'm going to do it just like I did last year. I'm just going to tell people to be aware and to look out. But the summer of 2024 is going to be incredibly bad. The rhetoric is going to spill into the streets again, and people will be attacked, and property is going to be destroyed. As the foundations of these ideologies that people had grown into the last several years begins to crumble in factual ways that they can't deny. And then what's going to happen with these people is they're going to be angry, they're going to be resentful, and they're going to strike out because they're not happy and they don't feel like their needs are being addressed. So we have to be very, very careful about that. Watch for it in your cities, watch for it in your families, because you don't know what you don't know. So in thinking about this, I'm reminded of what Father Havel, Robert Havel, used to tell me all the time whenever I had a really tough decision or proposition come to me at the property in Rome City. He was very fond of repeating something that President Lincoln used to say. He said, right is right, even if nobody is right. And wrong is wrong, even if everybody is wrong. Some things are absolutes in this world. And purity is one of those things. Purity does not waver in its definition. It is what it is. It doesn't change. So we have to be careful about protecting our word purity and what it means. Now, like I said before, it's not just about your sex life. It's about how you go about your entire day, how you deal with other people. Are you helping them? Are you fostering them? Or are you trying to put them down and being judgmental with them? Are you shutting them down? You don't need to do that. The best way to get somebody to agree with your thoughts is say, I hear you. I think I understand what you're trying to say, and try to repeat it back to them. Basic tenets of any kind of counseling you'd have with peer counseling or marriage counseling and things like that. One of the first things you want to do is let people know that you hear them. But then the second thing you need to do is repeat back what they say so that they can push back if they need to and feel threatened or imposed upon by your quiet resolve in this, hopefully. Don't ever get into a shouting match with anybody. It doesn't do any good. What you want to do is you want to listen to them, say, hey, I hear you, but I think you're missing something, and try to explain your point, and just kindly walk away if it doesn't gather to the next step. Because, like I've been trying to say, this is a war that's not going to be won with hammer blows. It's going to be won with feather strokes. That's very, very important to think about. No hammer blows. You have to win with feather strokes. So that means you have to quietly and dignifiably explain your stance, your beliefs, and your methods of handling these things in a quiet and proper way with these other people. And if you don't get an agreement in that or some sort of pacified response, feel free to walk away. Walk away, with dignity. Walk away knowing that you did the right thing. And purity is on your side. And we will all be okay if you just work on yourselves and your families. Another thing that is striking me, and it goes along with this, is the news cycle and what's going on, and the difference in what is said in the foreign news agencies and what is said in our domestic news agencies. Now, I'm talking about the U.S. in particular because I don't have a frame of reference. I don't live in any other country. So if you're watching this in another country, I'm coming from a U.S. perspective. But I think you all would agree that these trends follow, and they follow much more quickly now than they did a couple decades ago. And if you're following the foreign news cycle right now, you'll see there's been an uptick, a huge uptick, in the number of attacks against Christians by Muslims and authorities in distant countries. Now, one of these is Nigeria, and a lot of this news isn't reported. One of the reasons because it's black on black. You know, we had the whole thing that happened while Bill Clinton was in control in the White House for all those years, and the attacks in Rwanda. You know, millions of people died, and hardly anybody ever talked about it. Well, the same thing's going on right now because it didn't favor the objectives of the ruling classes and what they wanted the messages to be at that time. So those news stories were shut down, and millions of people died. Millions. It was about it was on par, I think, with the number of people that died legitimately from the pandemic. You know, as a result of that actually died from AIDS and not with COVID and not from COVID. So, sorry about the slip there about the AIDS. But it's coming. Anything that happens in Europe ends up in the United States. Everything. So watch for it. Be careful. Watch out for this Easter. There'll be a mounted attack against the thoughts and feelings of Christians in particular and Catholics ultimately. So they always want to go after who they feel is the kingpin in that. And for a lot of these attack groups, they always want to go after the fundamental institutions of the Catholic Church. And I understand that. You always want to punch up. But they're also going to take in their wake all the Christian denominations, whether it be Lutheran, any other church, a non-aligned church or whatever. Anyone who's a faithful person, they're going to come after you. And you think they already have. They haven't even begun. So how do we go about dealing with this? What does the call to purity ask of us in this situation? Well, like I alluded to earlier, I think it suggests that we all need to work on ourselves and our own confidence, and with that then our families, making sure that there isn't a divide in your own home. You may be living with an ideological divide and you don't even know it. Because if you're not talking to your children, when they come home from school or at the dinner table, what happened in school today? What did you guys talk about? And if you're watching a news event or you see something in the street that happens, that's a great opportunity to ask your kids' input. Say, hey, what do you think about that? What happened? And wait for the kid to respond. Don't coach them. Let the kids say, what happened. And you're going to find out how your child feels and how anyone else feels. So it works all the way through adulthood. But be engaged. Don't be, overpowering in these discussions. You want to be able to leave the door open for all this to weep out, because that's the only way you're going to find this out. And that's all part of being an OLaMan, or Our Lady of America man. And that could be a woman. It could be a child too. It's just what you need to do is you need to concentrate on the purity and find out how purity is in the discussion or it's not in the discussion. I'm reminded of something from back in college when we were doing thoughts on analytical thinking. And the professor said something like, if a story isn't adding up, it probably means that truth wasn't in the equation to begin with. So what you want to do is you want to go back and analyze all these components of the argument or the discussion or the point that's being made and make sure that everything checks the right the quality that you're expecting in the truthfulness and the factualization of the argument that's being made. So I've always found that one to be a very, very useful and productive tool in my bag of tricks here is always finding out if there's truth involved in it, because just because somebody says something, they may feel quite honestly that it was they believe the person that lied to them, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But people are out there, they're creating their own sense of reality, and they're trying to force some of this nonsensical type thinking upon everyone else in the community, and it's a problem. So we all know it. The way to deal with it is by being calm, thinking about not being heavily reactive, but try to think about feather strokes. The right side of the argument is in your thinking. Now, in my previous segment that I put up on here, I talked a bit about the canal diggers in Rome City and how Rome City ended up getting its name. And these two groups of canal diggers, one was Protestant in faith. They were in the town of Northport, and the other folks were Catholic Irish people, and they got the swampland. They got the bad end of the stick, but they got jobs, and they were able to thrive, even though they were oppressed and put down by the folks who were in Northport or the Protestant camps, because they didn't want anything to do with these dirty Irish Catholic people, and they were, really at odds with each other. Now, if you listen to that story, you also realize that there is no Northport anymore. Northport died, and Rome City thrived. Why? Well, I would suggest that it was because of the element of purity that was in the Irish camp. They didn't fight back against these things. They took it, they took the derisive name-calling, and they made it into something positive. And that's how we got here today. But we need to work on ourselves and our families. We need to know what every member in our household is thinking about something. And if there's a change or a correction or a learning opportunity there, that's great. That's what you want. But you want the trust, and you want the concentration on the children understanding what it is that mom and dad want for them and expect of them. Give them expectations. Give them strong expectations. There was a young man that I used to coach in baseball way back years ago. Well, this young man is turning 50 years old this month, I believe. So it scares me that much time has gone by. But I started working with this kid when he was about 11 years old. And he was just such an awesome kid compared to the rest of his teammates. And you're being a coach in life, there's always one or hopefully two really standout athletes that you got to work with that get it. And this kid got it from day one. It helped that his father was an ex-ball player himself and was an Army trained. I don't know what he was. I think he did counseling at the university. But this guy was very well formed, and his wife was very well formed, and I just loved coaching this kid. And he wasn't the greatest athlete, but he just always stood out. He always ended up being in the right place at the right time. He just had such good game sense, so I loved him. And with the baseball, when you got a kid at shortstop that has control over the situations, that's always a wonderful asset to have. Well, this kid grew up. He ended up playing in the major leagues, and he's now in the Hall of Fame. And one of the things that his parents always did, because I asked him, I said, why in the hell is this kid, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't want people going out there and freaking out, but I said, why is this kid so different? And I said, he always seems to be there with the right answer that goes above and beyond what I was expecting. What do you do with this kid? And the mother says, we make him sign a contract every year on his birthday. I said, a contract? I said, what's that contract say? He says, well, every year he gives us a contract on his birthday about what he's going to do, the 3 to 5 things that he's going to accomplish in the next year. And we hold him to it. We review it on his birthday before he gets his presents, and we review his previous year's contract and see what he made. So we're having this follow-up exam. We're seeing how our progress is doing, and he always exceeds it. I said, that's wonderful. I said, because you put a high expectation on this child. You sat down and talked with him in a constructive way. He wrote out what the goals were for the year and then signed it. And that is an awesome way to go about this stuff with your kid. Have a contract with a kid. It makes them feel like they're being honored, they're being respected, that you have regard for them, and you're not just going to yell at them if they do something wrong. These parents would go to the contract that he signed if something, came off board during that year. And only one or two times did they ever have to do anything, and they just felt they had to do something because if they didn't do anything, the kid's going to walk through without any kind of questioning. But the kid was awesome. He went on to have a phenomenal career with the New York Yankees. Everybody knows him. And I'm pretty proud. I didn't do it, but I'm just proud that I had a chance to meet his parents, because wonderful folks, wonderful people. But they cared. They got involved with this kid. And I think everybody needs to do that. So, sorry to get blubbery, but not having had my own kids, I'm vicariously living through other people's, and it's a good thing. So, remember, hammer blows are out, feather strokes are in. We need to move these children and ourselves towards a life of purity, which will allow us, just like these canal diggers had to go through. They went through so much suffering and pain being down in the swampland, where they would get sick and they'd have a tougher life. But they were here and they were living and they had an opportunity and they forged ahead. And in doing that, they exhibited purity all throughout their work, and they ended up building a wonderful town, which flourished and did very, very, very well. And so we can't sit there and deny the facts and evidence when it comes to that there. All we can do now is to sit there and think to ourselves, if we use this old approach in our lives right now, we can work on our family, making sure that we are together and safe and have the same principles and the same thoughts and the same desires to move forward and make our contracts with each other in these family units. That will spread to our communities, our neighbors, our work, and other things like that. I told you before, you live a life with purity, everyone's going to notice and they're going to be a part of it. And they're going to be a part of you, and you're going to be a part of them, because it's just more funner, as the kids might say. It's just better. You don't have these insecurities. You don't have these other problems. You know that your right is being met with other right in regard to things. So this is a way we're going to get through this thing. So I don't want to keep muttering around a little bit, but when you put high expectations on people, if they have regard for you and you have regard for them, 9 times out of 10, they're going to exceed those expectations. But you have to put expectations on them. It's like when I tell dads that you need to endorse your daughters. Because if you don't endorse your daughters and tell them that they are valuable and that you value them and you appreciate them and you have all this regard for them, you could have trouble. So let's see where this goes. Well, the trouble the dad would have is, the daughter coming home with a mutton head saying, "But Daddy, I love him." And at that point, every father knows he's lost the war. So you don't want those 5 words to come into your household sometime when little Erica or Jenny comes home with a mutton head and thinking he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. He might be, but no dad ever wants to hear, "But Daddy, I love him." And so we'll just kind of leave that for today's take on things. So thanks for listening. Come back, and I love you. Take care.